Greenwood would never be what it was, but it can certainly be more than what it is. And that's going to take a collective effort to accomplish that. Now, how do we go about accomplishing that is a task in itself, because we're in 2021, or 2020, or 2019, or in the 2000s, and whenever we started this effort. The climate, things are different now. Different in a sense that, we talk about equity, we talk about justice and injustices, we talk about equal opportunities. Well, if we're going to talk the talk, we need to walk the walk.
Years later, where almost 100 years ago, 6 people had airplanes, 31 grocery stores, 21 restaurants. We had movie theaters. We had hotels that were black owned. And with what we watch in the news today, when people portray black folks as only people that go to jail for things that are now legal, incarceration levels exploded in this state, where entrepreneurism and the spirit of economic independence is what we were, is what we have in our DNA, and I want to see that again. And I think that telling this story and bringing people here and creating these economic opportunities is the way to address it.
I've been here for nearly 25 years. I was here when we had our 75th year commemoration, and I'll be here when we have the 100-year commemoration. And over that time span, I've had the opportunity to meet and interact with many of the survivors who have since passed. I was able to hear them tell their stories and see them seek reparations. And although reparations, they never received reparations, one of the things that they said was most important to them was that their children and grandchildren finally know the rich history of the Greenwood District, that they know their history as successful business owners, savvy business owners, that they know about how much they loved their community and they loved one another, how resilient and proud and courageous they were. So for me, while those survivors have passed, I feel that I have a responsibility to continue to tell their story.
Black Wall Street, it is like going viral. And that's a term that if you Google, it just comes up. One of the most Googled items. But a lot of people don't know it's Greenwood, and it's in uptown/downtown Tulsa.
There is energy that is still here from the massacre that, I don't want this to be like a paranormal type of thing. However, there is energy that lingers that you can tell that there are entities that are really attracted to the positivity and not so much to the negativity. And so for me as a business owner, what I try to do is just do really good business and expand.
When we came in 2011, the ballpark was relatively new. There was a lot of energy that Greenwood was going to soon be folded into this urban growth that the Arts District was experiencing, the Blue Dome District, and it was moving this way. But Greenwood itself is culturally distinct, and there wasn't just the flow of that traffic coming onto Greenwood, the recognition that this is a unique, somewhat sacred land, that it hasn't found a way to prosper economically because it represents such profound grief that it hasn't been embraced, even though that time is due.
To be on this historic avenue, like, people don't understand today because they weren't alive during the heyday of Black Wall Street, a lot of them during 1920s. But Greenwood Avenue was like the Rodeo Drive of Beverly Hills. It was like the Wall Street of New York. It was like the Beale Street of Memphis. It was like the Auburn Avenue of Atlanta. It was the street that everything was on. To have this church on Greenwood Avenue, to be the oldest continuous landowner on Greenwood, like, nobody has owned their land on Greenwood or in the Greenwood district longer than Vernon has owned hers. Nobody. We've owned this parcel of land since 1908. And that that still gives me chills.
I grew up on Greenwood. You know, we had one rule when I was a child. Don't let anyone call me and tell me you were doing something wrong. And so we could go anywhere, and we were all up and down Greenwood. We sold Eagles across the street to make money. You know, we found pop bottles and sold them. And we just grew up, and I guess growing up here, it's common. Whereas when I left and went to the military, everybody was, wow, you were on Greenwood? And they would talk about Greenwood like it was all of this and all of that. And to me, it was just my neighborhood. So, you know, I grew up here and I seen all the changes. When at one time it was businesses, I was told at one time it was at least 40% of all Black people in North Tulsa owned a business. Now it's like 5%.
Theaters, nightclubs, variety stores, you name it. Pool hall, recreation, man. Now it's one block. So when I remember it and recall, there's a hurtful feeling because I know what it has been and can never be again.
Greenwood in 1921 was a pretty rapidly growing place, as was all of Tulsa. It was known as one of the most prosperous black communities in the country. And there were some very nice middle-class neighborhoods in Greenwood. There were also some pretty poor neighborhoods. In 1920, 21, in that era, there were really two different standards. An African American could work really hard, succeed, and if they were really lucky, they achieved what we would think of today as the middle class. A young black fella and a young white woman who was operating the elevator had some kind of contact on the elevator. When the elevator got to the first floor, she screamed on the elevator. When the elevator got to the first floor, the young black fellow took off running. He's identified as Dick Rowland. And so that happened on May 30th. The next morning, on May 31st, the police arrested him and brought him in. So he was in the city jail, which was down at 2nd and Main down here. The police commissioner, a man named Atkinson, said he got a telephone call saying we're gonna get this guy. So they decided to move him to the county jail, which was at 6th and Boulder, and it was a much more secure place. It was on the top floor of the courthouse, and it was virtually impregnable. And so they moved him there, and people started kind of congregating around the courthouse. And I have to say, it's not exactly clear why most of the people who were there, what their intent was. You have to keep in mind, at this time, there was no radio, there's no television, there's no news helicopters. If you want to see what's going on, you have to go there in person. So in all likelihood, a lot of those people were just there to see what was going on. But at any rate, this crowd kept getting bigger and bigger, and the word began to circulate in Greenwood that there was going to be a lynching, that they were going to kill Dick Rowland. We soon had some number of black men going to the courthouse armed to protect Dick Rowland, and this was a pretty radical step. Today, this would have, we would have had all kinds of police, National Guard, all of that stuff out there to stop what was going on. In those days, you had the sheriff and his black deputy out in front of the courthouse trying to tell everybody to go home. And, the black men went home a couple of times, but the whites would not leave. And so eventually the black men came for a final time. There was a scuffle over a gun. The gun went off, and at that point, the riot part of all of this started. And it was in downtown Tulsa, and it was basically white people chasing the black people out of downtown Tulsa, and the black people retreated into Greenwood. And over the night of May 31st and June 1st, there was just kind of a gun battle across the railroad tracks that separated white Tulsa from black Tulsa. The National Guard, there were probably about 35 of them, went in and started taking into custody any black people they could. A lot of black people fled, most of them to the north. And then there were some black people who put up a fight, and they were shot. There were some gun battles. But at some point, Greenwood was pretty much cleared out. Then these arson squads came in and burned it to the ground. 35 square blocks gone in a matter of hours. By 11 or 12 o'clock on June the 1st, Greenwood was pretty much a pile of smoking rubble.
It's important to understand American history and understand that what happened in Tulsa in 1921 was really emblematic of the kind of racial violence and historical racial trauma that was happening in the United States more generally. Having said that, Tulsa had reportedly the worst outbreak of racial violence in terms of what was described as a race riot. What's often unreported and sometimes underreported is the fact that the community, as a business community, revived after the devastation and peaked as a business community as Black Wall Street in the early to mid 1940s. After that peak in the 40s, the community was sustained for a number of years, then began to decline in the 60s, 70s, and 80s on account of urban renewal, integration, and other social, political, and economic factors. Today in the community, it's an integrated community. The biggest landowner in the community is the city of Tulsa, Tulsa Development Authority. One of the other large landowners in the community is Oklahoma State University Tulsa campus. So it's a community that is essentially an amalgam of different kinds of interests: residential, commercial, educational, entertainment, cultural, and religious.
I forever call myself the grateful pastor of historic Vernon Edmond Church because I'm eternally grateful to God to pastor a historical icon. Vernon started in 1905 and on Detroit Avenue. And in 1906, we came over here to Greenwood, went to First Gurley Hall. Then we went to a building on Archer. Then we purchased some land and built our first sanctuary on Archer. And then in 1908, came here and built our first sanctuary on Greenwood. And we've been on 307-311 North Greenwood. Over time, we purchased more land. So now we start with 309, then went to 308, then 307, then 310, then 311. And so we own 307 to 311. And we've been here since 1908. And we're the oldest continuous landowner, period, in the Greenwood district. Nobody has owned their land in this district longer than we have. And we have seen the rise, the destruction, the rebuild, and the demise of the historic Black Wall Street area. In 1919, we built our basement. 1921, we were building this sanctuary that was destroyed during the massacre, but miraculously, the basement survived. And it is the only thing we still have now from the Black Wall Street era on Greenwood that's still here. After urban renewal, we call it urban removal, after they built the interstate highway through here and they purchased up all the land, our church never has rebounded since, because it used to be a time people could walk across the street to come to the church. Now, no houses, like you see outside, no homes, and that is sad. And so today, we are a shell of our former self. In our heyday, we had over 1,000 plus members. This was back in the 20s and 30s. Today, we are under 200 members. We're actually under 150 members. And but we still have that same pride in our history and our culture and our heritage. We still worship here every Sunday. This less than 200 member church that has an operating budget of, like, last year we raised $200,000 for the whole year. It's just 200. But God blessed us to be able to provide for all those in need. So this is a truly remarkable place that believes in ministry, even while our edifice is in need of being restored, right? Our church is old, it's historic, and being historic includes maintenance.
I'm the second longest tenant here now, so it's just different people coming and going different businesses. There was once a hat store here, there was shoe stores, and just all kinds of businesses that come and go. The Greenwood that I know was in the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s. Now, when it comes to looking and seeing the destruction, that's the destruction I have in my mind, where this expressway come through and cut off the head of Greenwood. This was called Deep Greenwood. And once they started the construction on that, the rest of the Greenwood crumbled. And that, when I see destruction, I don't see the 1921. I see 1970.
When I was probably 20 years old, I remember coming in here and they danced up in this area, okay? And in the back, I wasn't supposed to go in the back because I was only 20 or 21. I may have been 21 by then, but I came here at 20 years old. But they'd gamble in the back. So the old men told me, don't go to Deep Greenwood. Somebody will kill you. Say, I was told you was down there the other night. I said, what you doing? I said, I was dancing and looking around. Say, you dance somewhere else. So at 20 years old, you got a lot of energy. I want to see everything. So yeah, it was a club here, and I think it was the Bonneville Club. When we came here and opened T's, we had left Tecumseh's barbershop. Mr. Tecumseh said, if you guys want to go down to Deep Greenwood, they've renovated that center, and we call it $1 million square. I said, is it gonna have air conditioning and good lighting and heat in the wintertime? And he said, yes. I said, then I'll go. He said, it's gonna cost you more money. I said, well, I'll pay a little money to have a little more luxury. So we moved in. When we came here, we were the first business that I could remember to come in here, other than the Oklahoma Eagle may have used a little space due to a burnout or something in their building. But we moved in '85. Very few businesses here, very slow. We were very angry because we got moved around due to what they call, they go into it and call it eminent domain. So they went in and they called it eminent domain. They tore buildings down. It was buildings up in the 1100 block, the 1000 block, and places like that up there that I thought should have been salvaged. They should have been able to remodel them or something. It's been a blessing. We've had some hard times. I was very angry when they put that baseball stadium in because I like football and basketball, and I figured baseball was just gonna, and I didn't want to see nothing like what I'd seen on 15th Street. But when they finished, all while they were building it, I was angry because people would walk in and we had carpets over there and they'd bring in black tar off the street, blacken up our carpets and so forth. But anyway, make a long story short, when they finished with this park, since it was a state of the art and they said it was $25 million, I said, I don't know how we can afford to stay here, but we're gonna stay. And Reuben Gantz said, well, I said, you gonna raise my rent? He said, Willie, we're not gonna raise your rent. Your rent's gonna stay the same, you'll be all right.
It's been a challenge in terms of redeveloping Greenwood, or let's say creating an environment that is part of Main Street America. Interestingly enough, I was born and raised here, and I've been working with the Greenwood area, the Greenwood district, since the mid-1980s. And I would run across individuals that were native Tulsans, and they would ask me where I work, what do I do, what am I involved with, and I would mention Greenwood. Well, this perplexion would come over their faces, wondering, well, Greenwood, where is that? And I would have to use landmarks to identify the area. So I would use OSU Tulsa as a landmark. And I would say, well, do you know where OSU Tulsa is? Oh yeah, we know that it is. Well, that's in the heart of the Greenwood district. Oh, and so What I chose to do and what my board chose to do early on when there was talk of relocating a baseball diamond somewhere downtown. We were approached by the city to consider allowing this ballpark to be built in the Greenwood area. And that was very contentious at the time because the community itself felt like this was holy ground and didn't really want a ballpark built here. But I felt it was an inherent marketing opportunity to create visibility for the area, at the same time to expose the city to its own history. The risk was taken to build a ballpark here. Well, after the ballpark opened, it created pedestrian traffic of well over 500,000 people a year, which was a successful marketing opportunity for us because I would sit in my office as the president of the Greenwood Chamber and just notice the traffic going up and down the sidewalks. Well, in the sidewalks on Greenwood, and one of the things we did, or I did, was to have a gateway to the ballpark entrance on Greenwood. And that's so people would have to walk down Greenwood and pass our merchants' storefronts on Greenwood. We have plaques in the sidewalks. And those plaques identify the location of businesses that were burned or destroyed during the 1921 massacre. And so I would notice people walking up and down the street, and they would walk up and down the street with their heads down. Well, they were reading the plaques in the street. So I thought, that's working.
The future looks bright for the Greenwood District. There are a number of projects and initiatives that are taking place, and I believe in 5 to 10 years, the Greenwood District will have went through this renaissance where we will see new businesses open, new development that is taking place. And so we are excited about what the future holds for the Greenwood District and for the Greenwood Cultural Center. Our purpose in part is to provide positive images of the African American community, to provide a place where our children can come and learn about their history and learn and explore different forms of the arts. And one of the most important things that we do is to create exhibits and archive photographs and share that information as it is related to the history of the Greenwood District.
When Booker T. Washington came here, he had been to Harlem, he had been to Memphis in particular, Chicago, and he looked at this place and said, this is the Black Wall Street. This is like the best place for African Americans in this country. And so we just want a little touch of that. If you go to Beale Street, we want a little touch of Beale Street. We want live action. We want some community involvement. We want live music. We want more restaurants. We want more foot traffic. We want better lighting at night so people can walk around and just explore. And to be honest with you, we don't want when people think of Greenwood, we don't want them to always think of the Tulsa Race Massacre. We want them to think about how you can be resilient, how you can make lemonade out of lemons, and how you can just have fun, enjoying life, because that's what American experience is all about. We have roughly 30 businesses and a very diverse pool of businesses. However, there is a key fact here. 80% of our businesses are led by African American females, which is an amazing fact. We have insurance agencies, we have large restaurants, we have natural health clinics, real estate agencies, a barbershop, 2 beauty salons. It's just, we have authors, a lawyer's office, accounting firm. We have a different arrangement of businesses here. that meets the needs of the Tulsa Greenwood area.
Just being here and upholding this legacy, and I try to do everything that I do in excellence, because when I look at our ancestors, when they came, they were people of excellence. And it's awesome, it's awesome as you look at the history. The majority of the business folks weren't from Tulsa. They migrated from other parts of the country. And, it's funny because they represented the United States, where folks come in and bring the different talents and turn it into a really great, awesome place. It's like 3 components of opening up the lock shop was to honor the ancestors and uphold their legacy. Also bringing Black businesses back to Greenwood, and also a launching board for other stylists to come in, not to come in to stay, but to come in and pick up different business practices from myself, and later on open up their own shops.
People are like, oh wow, you're on Greenwood? That's great. Like, they're surprised that a real estate company would be here. And to me, this is like prime real estate. I feel like still it's very much, undervalued by Tulsans and just overall. But I'm hoping that in the next few years, people will start to see the beauty of this place. I honestly I knew a little bit about the history of Black Wall Street, but not that much because it was never taught in schools. I've gone to college, I've gone to grad school, it's never taught in schools. But maybe a few years back, before I moved to Tulsa, my husband and I started talking about Black Wall Street because his mom always taught him about Black history that's not often taught in schools. So just being here, we learned a little bit more. And it was kind of a very interesting experience. And at the same time, it seemed like overall, across the country, people were starting to talk about this place more at the same time. So I'm just very happy, to be here, especially in this moment.
I met Marvin, and he was retiring from TPD and working with TPS, and his children were at Booker T, and it was then that we bonded over a love of collage. And I love collage, he loves collage. You could call it whatever you want. You could call it scrapbooking, you could call it whatever you want. But when he passed in 2016, his family left his collection of collages to the chamber, and in hopes that they would be displayed in some capacity, and a series of events led me to here. And I believe that everyone who's involved in supporting and rebuilding and restoring and Greenwood rising, Black Wall Street rising, is doing that work.
The reason Greenwood existed as a Black business community is because the people in the community couldn't actively participate in the dominant economy of the city of Tulsa. They created their own separate enclave adjacent to downtown across the Frisco tracks in what became known as the Greenwood District and Black Wall Street. So Greenwood really is the result of what I call an economic detour. In other words, the people in the community were not able to fully engage with the economy of the city of Tulsa, created a kind of separate economy, but still were dependent on the city of Tulsa for things like infrastructure, sewer, roads, and really got an unfair shake in that regard as well. One of the things that's happened of late, relatively, in a historical sense, is the city government of Tulsa changed from city commission, which is an at-large system, to a city council form of government, so that all sectors of the community, all geographic sectors, actually get represented in the city government and then are able to make decisions about things like infrastructure and so on.
We know that because of this is the only district that's the buildings that's left, we can't get what we had back. But to get some semblance of that and to show people, to be able to, the museum that's coming, to be able to show people what it was like back then, and with the addition of the ballpark, the museum coming, the things that we are having, that we like to see happen in these buildings, more people coming and joining the Greenwood Chamber experience. That's what I want to see. I want to see growth happen within this to expand on out all the way to back to Pine Even.
I think within the last few years, we've seen the Greenwood Chamber of Commerce in the Greenwood District become more active and recruit more businesses. Within the last few years, they've had nearly a dozen new businesses open in the Greenwood District. So people, entrepreneurs are gaining access to the resources that they need and are choosing to open their businesses in the historic Greenwood District.
Not knowing the history of Greenwood before I moved here, it was something that once I did move here, it was just like, wow, this is incredible. You know, I never knew anything about this before. So to be successful here on Greenwood actually meant more because of the history, the legacy that was here. I felt like I had to do the ancestors justice. I have this farmers insurance agency here located on Greenwood, as well as I have a fitness and recreational studio. They do within the studio. There's tap, dance, ballet, and also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a music studio. So these are some of the things that I'm doing here currently on Greenwood. I don't know how it was before, so I can only talk about my experience now. At least the last couple of years, and there's a lot of traffic. Like there's meaning. I've had several interviews, a lot of news footage, magazines from all across the world have come just to understand what's happening here, what's happened here, and to get a better idea of the climate. There's never a dull moment on Greenwood. I can say that.
It was a gym out north called the Reed Foundation, and I found Coach Reed there. Within a year, I became a champion. Boxing has done a lot for me personally outside of the gym, such as learning how to carry myself and wanting and striving for better things, such as good grades and just better goals in life. And so I was like, well, if boxing can do this for me, then I want to be a coach as well and see if I can change other kids' lives, or at least affect one person, then I know I'm doing something right. Greenwood is historic. Like I said, whenever I first got down here, I didn't know too much about Greenwood, so I had to do my research as well to understand the value of the ground that I'm standing on, you know, and I would try to implement that with my kids, you know, in the middle of training. I'd be like, everybody get down, everybody get down. So they're getting down, they're like, what? I'm like, now what if someone just came in here and just killed all of us? What if they just dropped bombs on us right now? You know, that's what happened back then. So it's not just about Black history as well and learning about Greenwood, but I tell my fighters, you know, you're Hispanic, learn about your culture. You know, Caucasian, learn about your culture. Native American, Chinese, it doesn't matter to me. It's the idea of doing your research, learning about and appreciating where we are right now, because there's so much history, you know, and the parents, I think as well, should take more initiative in teaching that to their children.
We have a tendency to sometimes drag along the past, and we never be able to really grow and move on to the future. And so we're here to, you know, bring, I guess, Greenwood up to date, you know, the millennial, you know. So it's kind of catch-22. You know, you don't never forget your history. Then therefore you never know where you're going, but also your history can also drag you down if you try to hold on to it. And so I teach the girls, you know, I have 6 daughters now working in business, that, you know, history is good for learning, but it never projects you, you know, forward. So we have to make sure that we keep moving forward. And so I'm here to hopefully bring, like I say, Greenwood up to date. I like to see Tulsa as a whole.
I'm that type of guy. You know, it's as a whole, you know, to be a small business mecca like it once was. That's my desire. You know, I'm not so much just concentrated here itself because it's such a small area, but you're only gonna be limited to what you can do. And so, you know, so as a whole, I like to see Tulsa along with downtown, let's say it that way, downtown Tulsa, and North Tulsa, East Tulsa, West Tulsa, and South Tulsa as a whole to be a small business mecca for other states to see.
When we were coming up with the concept, Guy, Troop, and I, we'll use a code word for the shop, and Liquid Lounge was the code word that we came up with, and it just stuck. And basically, what we are is a social coffee shop. Of course, coffee is the base. We are interested in selling the medicinal liquids such as roots, teas, and therefore, and then also wine. We're applying for a liquor license, wine license later on this summer. Because of the 100-year anniversary of the massacre and the attention it has gotten, has received over the last 24 months, there's a lot of interest outside of the district, outside of Oklahoma, about this legacy. So with having said that, that's brought a lot of speculative investors and people that's interested in seeing that this will be revitalized so that there's a model for the success of this community, because there is a Black Wall Street in every major city in America.
In Tulsa, we have generations of persons of all races, but extensive traumatization in the African American and the Native communities. And so a new way was set up here in this vortex in the context of significant trauma to assist with recovery. It begins with an adult who brings a child into the world and who has their own traumatic events in their life that they've not recovered from. And they don't have the capacity to have the empathy and the attunement to the emotional needs of their child. And there is a child that then experiences those adverse childhood experiences because the parent is using substances, or there's domestic violence taking place, or they have their own pains that they've not dealt with, and then that child experiences. So that's a very common thing, that we receive the referral because the child is acting out, but in looking closer, the child is experiencing trauma. But we can't blame the parents because the parents have experienced that trauma as well. So to help the whole family recover from trauma, ultimately, to help the whole community recover from trauma, is ultimately where we have to move.
So what's your world like? Mine is full of melanated children who actually thrive due to a lack of black fear and the absence of an oppressive system, where the teachers earn enough to actually call it making a living, and where Black Wall Street still flourishes on much more than just the Greenwood district, where there's not construction on every road in the city, where we are kings and queens, not men and women, not to be portrayed as villains. If you are a victim, this is the world that I live in. This morning I saw Terrence Crutcher at Donuts with Dad Day. Last night I watched Trayvon graduate from Florida State. Sandra Bland starts a business, relocates to the Bay, gives Oscar Grant a job with a great rate of pay. Eric Garner's doing great. Philando Castile is governor in his state. In my world, things have changed. I turn on the TV, I see Gary Payton, Michael Jordan, and LeBron. They going head up with AI, KD, Kobe Bryant. It's Game 7, 2 minutes left, score tied, championship is on the line, and everybody's in their prime, but I'm inclined to go with the Mamba. Cause like he's from the world's greatest continent, where we're taught to honor our mothers and our fathers. their sisters and their brothers, and so I took my head as if to say, hey auntie, welcome to Wakanda. Sincerely yours, T'Challa, but last name Killmonger. My world different. Cody Ransom.
The community thinks there's some hope, and but we have to get to the centennial before we can really experience that future, bright future that we have ahead of us. And now that our mayor, who is very courageous, you know, many people think I'm critical of him. He's the most courageous mayor we ever had. He has decided to lead the effort to search for the mass graves. And that right there could bring some type of solace to the situation. There's a mirror of hope that there will be some type of conciliation. And what I mean by that is we just look at the fundraising efforts they're already having success with. But a lot of people in the community, they see hope, but what they really want to see is our community to kind of preserve these historic buildings that we have here. And to them, if it becomes historical, to them, they feel like it will be around forever, right? And not just, you won't just focus on that vapor of tragedy.
I want to see, a better Tulsa. The Tulsa that I grew up in is not the Tulsa that we live in now. The America that I grew up in is not the America that we live in now. From a journalistic standpoint, we had canceled Juneteenth, and then, all of a sudden when President 45 said he was coming, we kind of wanted to, okay, well, we gotta, do something. We didn't understand why it was on that historic, date from an African-American perspective, because of the challenges that, we face now in America now, not America 10 years ago, but America now. It's very different from what it was 10 years ago. As long as we make sure that we include all people, as long as all lives matter on Greenwood, as long as, we have viable entities here and people spend here. You can't say, okay, we built those nice buildings and they got all those nice places down there. Now I'm not going to go down there and eat. I'm not going to go down there and buy clothes. I'm not going to go down there. There's some IT guys that's drafting down here. There's, doctors down here. But we have to get people who will come here and spend those dollars to keep those businesses going so that we can create generational wealth for our families, our kids, our grandkids. And I think that's the key. I wasn't born a trust fund baby, but I like to leave my grandkids a trust.
We are sitting on sacred grounds. We are sitting on where the massacre took place. We're sitting on the grounds of Booker T. Washington High School. We have the Ellis Walker Memorial to demonstrate that. So not only are we building our community with North Tulsa, we want to build our community and be a part of the growth in the Greenwood District. A lot of students are not aware of the history of this area. So that's why we offer many classes, even to community, to educate them on what transpired back in 1921. We held a class, a Black Wall Street class, and the majority of those were community who wanted to know more about Greenwood, the history of Greenwood. So now students are hungry for more. The community is hungry for more. And it's our duty to provide that education for them.
Me representing this district and the history of Black Wall Street and the massacre and the emotion of it was incumbent upon me to do something because nothing had happened in nearly 20 years in relation to Black Wall Street, our culture, and no public funding for the Greenwood Cultural Center. And so I formed a commission to address the issue, to tell that story. And that evolved even past just the Greenwood Cultural Center to an opportunity to tell the story itself. And we started with working with the Greenwood Cultural Center, and as we evolved, we ended up having our own Greenwood Rising History Center that will now be located at Greenwood and Archer. And that is so important to the people here to tell their side of the story.
I was part of a group that was commissioned by the state of Oklahoma to build or create a memorial to the 1921 race massacre, which was a recommendation by another group of folk that were commissioned with the responsibility of determining, researching culpability for the massacre. One of the recommendations given to the state was to create a memorial to the 1921 race massacre. And once we finished our work, our idea or our recommendation was to create this park. The state then took our work, appropriated funds to develop this park. We created an organization, formed a 501c3, began the work of developing this park. Well, in developing the park, what we ran into, we were one of the casualties of budget cuts. Most of the feedback we got was, who wants to memorialize a tragedy? That's something that's happened 80 years ago, and so let's just move on. Let's just get over it. Well, my comeback to that kind of response was, it's interesting that someone wanted to memorialize the bombing of a building that devastated property, destroyed property, lives were lost. What's the difference?
As Secretary of Tourism in my role here in the state of Oklahoma, one of the biggest assets that we have in the state is the Greenwood District. It's one of the areas of our state that is talked about more than most any other part of our state. When people are calling into the city of Tulsa or visiting the state of Oklahoma, it's the Greenwood District. They want to figure out how they get to Black Wall Street. And so as Secretary of Tourism, what we are doing right now in the state of Oklahoma is making sure that people know across the world about Greenwood, about Black Wall Street, and making sure they know about the Race Massacre Centennial. What the bombing memorial did for Oklahoma City, and rallying that city together, and really rallying the state together. But what that museum in downtown Oklahoma City is really the heartbeat of the city now. And I truly believe that what we're building here in Greenwood and the Race Massacre Museum is going to be the heartbeat of this city. And it's really going to be a pilgrimage type of experience for people all across the world, all across America, to come to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and to learn so that the past is not repeated, but also to teach. To teach Americans about building a world-class city, about entrepreneurship, and to make sure that what happened 100 years ago never happens again.
How can I say that? This is kind of easing the tension in a community that's been balled up for 99 years. This is kind of showing them that, hey, we can do it again. Might not have 600 businesses, but we can have 100.
You see, we gotta not stereotype and be so small, but we need all of Tulsa, and we need to treat each other right. And if the Lord's not pleased with us, that's how we got a plague now. We need to treat each other right, stop killing each other, stop mistreating each other, stop backbiting and lying about things.
One of the reasons that we still see issues around Black Lives Matter, mass incarceration, all the kind of social issues that are evident right now is because we haven't adequately dealt with our history. These things come in fits and starts, and we have been remiss, I would say, in terms of addressing the wounds that exist from historical racial trauma.
If we don't learn how to love each other, we won't never have nothing. Because if we all fall, if one said fall, we go all fall. Because it's a circle. Life is a circle. You can't just go 180 degrees and stop.
If I can make a difference somehow, OSU make a difference. and get the message out, conveying the importance, of being on sacred ground, honoring the past, but again, looking forward to a better and more positive future.
Tulsa has so much potential. Oklahoma has so much potential and an opportunity to show the world how to resolve, how to address issues of race. How awesome would it be if Tulsa could show Ferguson, or Tulsa could show Louisville, Kentucky, or Tulsa can show Minnesota how you as a community respond to racial tension and unrest and inequity. How best to do that? The world is waiting for Tulsa.
I knew on a sort of an intellectual level, I guess you'd say, I knew in my brain that, in the 1920s, there was segregation and racism, but I didn't really understand it until I got involved in reading all these old newspapers and stuff. And it's not just about the massacre; it's about all the thousands of daily indignities that people went through during that period. But then it also brought home to me just how almost everything in life is about money and power, whether it's who gets to control the remote control at home, or who decides who gets what. It's about money and power, and to a large extent that was about money and power. It was about asserting control over this group of people. I mean, it was, what I think happened with the destruction of Greenwood is you had a bunch of white people who said, we don't care how big you think you are, or how successful you are, or how much money you have, we can take it away in an instant. And they went down and did it.
Never gonna lose the sound, we're never gonna forget the beat, 'cause I'm addicted to the melody. I've got rhythm in my feet. But when I've lost the plot and I've forgotten every part, I know you'll be right here waiting if I go right back to the start. Would you be dancing in the street, find a melody we can repeat? There will be a song from every girl and boy, and it'll sound like joy. There will be dancing in the street, find a melody you can repeat. There will be a song from every girl and boy, and it'll sound like joy. It'll sound like joy. It'll sound like, it'll sound like, it'll sound like, it'll sound like joy. I'm never gonna turn around, 'cause you never turn your back on me. I'm delivered by the remedy I've been singing in my sleep. But when I feel distraught and I've forgotten every part, I know you'll be right here waiting if I go right back to the start. There should be dancing in the street, find a melody we can repeat. There will be a song from every girl and boy, and it'll sound like joy. There will be dancing in the street, find a melody you can repeat. There will be a song from every girl and boy, and it'll sound like joy. And it'll sound like joy. And it'll sound like, it'll sound like, it'll sound like, it'll sound like joy. Out on the street will sound like joy, and down to my feet will sound like joy. Hate can't compete with sounds of joy. Voices repeat and sound like joy. Out on the street will sound like joy, down to my feet will sound like joy. Hate can't compete with sounds of joy. Down to the voices sing like joy.